Good morning. Let me say I'm just so humbled and honored to be able to host the U.S. Conference of Mayors National Meeting on Exports and Ports. We've had a great session this morning talking about the importance of our exports and ports and what it means for our economy, putting America back to work, investing in infrastructure that is so critical for our country. Ports play a major role in putting America back to work all around the globe, and we want to remain competitive and compete in the marketplace, and the only do that is to invest in our ports. Today I have a host of mayors from around the country, and I'd like to start off by introducing to you Mayor Smith from Mesa, Arizona, who is the second Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Brown, and thank you for welcoming us here to Jacksonville for this most important conference. The U.S. Conference of Mayors has one message. Cities are where the action is. Cities are where economic activity happens. Cities is where economic growth will happen. And the greatest opportunity we have is right now is in exports, and that's why the U.S. Conference is issuing today the U.S. metro economies and exports in the next decade. We believe that 40% of the real growth in our GDP will come through exports. We live in a world economy, and that world economy needs to be connected. And one of our greatest challenges we have is that in America, we have fallen behind in our ability to connect with the world. If you can't move goods, you can't export. And our problem is that we have lagged in infrastructure investment. We have redirected resources, and we all know how challenged we are with resources in Washington and the state level, and certainly we know it on the city level. But we have failed to make investments that bring real economic returns. And one of the greatest failures of this country is our failure to keep up with infrastructure investment. That includes our roads, our highways, our airports, and certainly our seaports. If we are to take advantage of the economic opportunity that the growth in the world economy, the rising middle classes in places such as Brazil, China, India, we have to invest. We have to invest in our infrastructure. These are investments that will return many times the investment we make. So it's not a matter of, well, how can you spend this money in these areas of tight finances and deficits? Our question is, how can you not make this investment? We're looking for a partnership with Washington. We're looking for smart investments. We're looking for smart cuts, not dumb cuts in Washington, and we think that it's dumb to cut the investment in our ports, in our highways, and in those things that connect us with the world and create real economic opportunity. That's why we're here. We're developing and refining this message so that when we get together with all the mayors in a few short months, that we will be able to define a well-defined policy that we will put forth to Washington and those leaders, and hopefully that will make a point in this presidential election, in the elections for Congress that are coming up this fall, and that as we roll into the next year, we will have a well-defined national policy that will help us take advantage of these economic opportunities, because this is where it's happening. And now I'd like to introduce somebody who is well-versed in the importance that ports have in not only our local communities but nationwide, the mayor of Long Beach, California, Mayor Bob Foster. Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Smith. As Mayor Smith mentioned, I come from a city that actually has rebuilt itself on international trade. The city of Long Beach in the early 90s was, I would argue, at depression-level conditions, and what has been able to revitalize us has been international trade and the economic activity and jobs it brings. Our ports, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, the largest port complex in the country, are responsible for over 300,000 jobs in Southern California and 1.4 million jobs across this country. Literally, the economic activity in the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles touch every congressional district and every area of this country. If you want to see job growth, if you want to see economic activity, if you want to rebuild this country and have the economy rebound, you have to put money into infrastructure, particularly ports and the systems that serve the ports. You know, Mayor Smith mentioned about our declining infrastructure. It's actually more than just the investment. Our parents and grandparents invested in this country. We're using the things every day that they built. We're not rebuilding them. We're doing a disservice to our children. Our children could have a life that's not as good as ours because of our lack of investment. We cannot do that in this country. You have to take a longer view. We have to be more future-oriented. We've got to care about our kids and our grandchildren, and that means putting money back into ports, into infrastructure, the highways, the rails, the bridges, the grade separations that need to be built so we can move goods in and out of this country quickly. All the countries that were mentioned by Mayor Smith are doing that in far greater amounts than we are. If we want to put people back to work, if we want to have an economy that's durable for the long term, invest in infrastructure, invest in our ports, and we need a federal policy to do this today. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to acknowledge our President and Executive Director for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Tom Cochrane. Tom, thank you, Tom, for putting this meeting on. Let's give Tom a hand for his leadership. I also want to acknowledge a lot of the port directors are here from around the country and leaders from the economy, and one of them is Paul Anderson. Paul, the Port of Jacksonville, thank you for being here. Let's give him a hand for his support. I want to thank all the mayors, my colleagues from around the country, to come to Jacksonville as we host this national meeting to talk about how do we put America back to work, to reinvest in our cities around the globe, to be able to compete in a global economy, to make sure that we have the tools and resources in the 21st century. And we're really looking for a partnership with Congress to make sure that they know that this is a priority for all cities around the country, and it makes a big difference. At this time, I would like to open up the press conference for questions.
Talk about, we had this meeting just a couple of weeks ago that so few ports are Panamax ready in the U.S. What's your concerns on that?
You want to say anything?
The coast on the ports on the West Coast are actually deeper in general. The East Coast has a number of ports that need to be dredged to give them at least a 50-foot clearance so larger ships can come in. And that costs billions of dollars. And there's a list of all the current draft depths and what the planned draft depths are, and the dollars associated with it. There's another column of where the money's coming from, and that's pretty much blank.
Sure.
If I can make one comment, because I had an interesting question yesterday. Is it, well, why does it matter? Why upgrade? I mean, won't business react? The fact of the matter is we're in a global economy. And commerce is like water. It will take the path of least resistance. And that's what we're finding out now. If the path of least resistance is to other markets, and there are other markets who are now as substantial as the American market. The U.S. market is not the only market in this world. And what happens is that economic opportunity will go to those places that are more efficient, that have more effective systems, and they will bypass. And I know that is a concept that is almost impossible for us in America to imagine. It wasn't that long ago when America wasn't the dominant country. England, France, back in the 18th and even 19th centuries, they were the dominant. We became the dominant economy because we did things better, and we took over the world economy. It is not far-fetched to believe we could lose that position if we don't keep up with the rest of the world. This is history repeating itself. This is a clarion call for action that I think is based on reality. Unfortunately, it's a pretty scary reality. So if the East Coast does not dredge their ports, it is not inconceivable that others outside this country will go elsewhere because they can find people in these emerging economies that will buy their products. And that will happen, and we will suffer. So.
The push for deep water has been pretty much driven by the widening of the Panama Canal. All the ports are kind of going after it, saying that we need to address that. But today, Mr. Martin said the economic result might not be what everybody's forecasting. It might be less. How does that affect the immediacy of getting to deep water?
You want to talk about that specifically?
Here's the widening of the Panama Canal. I'll just give you an example, level set. I was talking to one of our port people. When he started work on the West Coast, the average ship had 500 containers. 500 what I call TEU, 20-foot equivalents. Today, it's 8 and 9,000, going to 13 and 14,000. If you can't accommodate those ships, Mayor Smith's right. What's going to happen is we're going to lose our ability to export. Our economy's going to suffer. We're going to lose jobs, and those jobs are going to go somewhere else. And we have to make those improvements. Bigger ships are coming, and bigger ships are much more efficient. If we can't accommodate them here, they'll go elsewhere.
And here's an interesting thing, cause and effect. The Panama Canal did not create the increase in size of ships. The Panamanians are reacting to the realities in the marketplace. The fact of the matter is they were afraid of losing that market because ships were happening. And so that's why they are widening the canal. It isn't everyone saying, gee, hey, Panama widened the canal, let's build bigger ships. That's not what happened. And so you saw how they reacted. I think it was mentioned today they actually had a national referendum to invest over $5 billion for a country the size of Panama. That's an incredible accomplishment. That's how serious they took their vulnerability to the changes in the marketplace. And that's a great example of what we're talking about. You know, Panama reacted. They invested. You know, it's amazing that we're sitting here talking about Panama as the leader in what to do to react to the market, and we're talking about all the East Coast ports that are saying, gee, do we need to make this investment? Or if we do, you know, like what they're doing, talking in Charleston. What was the last I heard? I'm not an expert on Charleston Harbor. What was it? Announced maybe 8 years to complete environmental and other studies, which means that, you know, it might be 12, 15 years before that port is even expanded. You know, that's a world of time in the economy. You could completely lose your position if you're looking at 10, 15, 20 years before you react. So I was saying this is a call for action right now.
Mayors are also dealing with constituents who want to get to work and back home through congestion. You got transit programs. Does this mean you're going to have to ship some money that otherwise would be solving those problems to ports? Is that a trade-off?
No, I don't think you really need a trade-off. I think the real question is, will we commit to invest, and not just in transit and roads and bridges, but ports? And I think we need to do both. If we want to remain competitive in the marketplace, really be competitive globally, position our cities to compete at every level, then we need to make the investment. And the return is very simple. If we don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and we're going to be left behind. So we have to make that commitment. We all know, you know, we're got to invest in transit and roads and et cetera, but the ports are the key. We're living off the past of our grandmother and great-grandmother's investment. It's now time to invest for the next generation, our kids and our grandkids, and that's what we want to do. And that's what we think we so one other point, so we need a really national policy to really put this on the map that would really identify and have dedicated funds to invest in the ports. No longer should we be just on the side, but we need to be treated equal to as transportation. The same way we have a transportation bill, we need a ports bill, we need a national policy, we need a national freight policy to really make sure that we do this right. We want to make sure that we're investing in the 21st century way of transportation and ports and exports. Mayor Foster.
Yeah, this is not a zero-sum game, and they're not mutually exclusive. One of the things that was discussed this morning is treating this as a system. This is not just talking about the area around the water where the ports are. It's all of the things associated with it. It's the highways. It's the rail. It's air. It's all of the things that make free movement of freight in this country possible. So if you improve those, you not only improve freight transport, you improve mobility for everyone else. And so this is not mutually exclusive. This is why a national policy is needed to incorporate this and make sure we treat this as a system.
One other comment is that I think one of the unfortunate things is that in Washington, all dollars seem to be treated the same. In the cities, we have operating budgets, we have capital budgets. We make investments seeking returns. This morning, it was stated that an investment in the interstate highway system returned 6 times that investment. This morning we learned that an investment in ports returned 7 times that investment. It boggles my mind as to why we're not making investments that return 6 and 7 times the amount of the investment. That is something that we should be clamoring to look forward to doing both of those investments, not only to complete the entire system, But that creates long-term economic prosperity, and we're equating dollars that we spent on operations with investment dollars. And that's the frustration we have, is that let's talk about investments that build long-term. Let's talk about investments that not only improve the quality of life for our commuters, who I hope we have the problem that they're having trouble getting to a well-paying job. That's a great problem to have. We'll take that on. I would much rather have that problem than be at home looking for a job. Let's make investments that have great returns, multiple returns.
Mayor.
On behalf of Mayor Stodola from Little Rock, I'm Mayor Patrick Hayes from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and we're obviously in the middle part of the country. And I want to echo the comments made regarding, alternate transportation other than our road. Pardon me. In the 50s is when Eisenhower, Republican, began what's the greatest public works project in the global history, and that's our interstate highway system. And the economic engine that's provided is without a doubt one that we've collected on for many years and will in the future. But the population of this country is going to be about 500 million people, in the next 30 to 40 years, and that kind of congestion and those kind of constraints are going to cost us the artery of our trade system, and water and rail are obviously going to be the most important things that we can invest our dollars in. And the one thing that I'd like to add and give you a specific example, we've been working in Arkansas for about and Oklahoma for about 10 to 12 years in increasing the depth of the navigation channel in the Arkansas River from 9 feet to 12 feet. Now, only about 5% of the Arkansas River is going to have to be attacked that way, but we have not been able to secure the funding to do that. And as a result, the Mississippi is 12 feet deep. So, you take a left and you're going to have to, up the Mississippi River going up toward Oklahoma, you're going to have to offload, you're going to have to lighten your load. It's going to cost you, and the economic opportunities of that kind of a trade route is going to be negative. So all of us, whether it be inland, whether it be the ports, are going to have to look to our waters and our rails in increasing the kind of transit and economic vitality of our nation's mobility system. If we don't, the kind of constraints that we're experiencing now are going to continue to cost us in jobs, and that's what this conference is all about. Thank you.
I'm Frank County. I'm the mayor of Des Moines, Iowa, from the heartland, so to speak. Last week we had the Vice President of China, Vice President Xi. We announced a multi-billion-dollar export trade agreement with China, and Iowans are excited about that. But the ability to be able to export goods and services, and in our case ag products and machinery, is our ability to get it from Iowa to the West Coast, in this case to China. And their capacity needs to be enhanced. They have to be able to handle the goods and services as we see massive increases in our trade opportunities. But also we have to make sure the connections to those places so that they can offload and get the stuff out of the port and out to the heartland the same way that we get it back. So it's a hand-in-glove piece. We have to make sure that the ports have the capabilities and the capacity, but we also have to have the connections through highway and rail so we can get our goods and services, and especially we have the ability to ship our multi-billion-dollar crops to meet our side of the agreement with China. So we are looking forward to working with the federal government. We think that they need to move their transportation bill forward. We need to enhance our capabilities in the ports, and it all works together. It's a system, and we are going to be taking a lesser and lesser seat in the international market if we don't improve those connections. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make one more other comment from other mayor. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm Mayor John Mark, City of Tallahassee. I don't have a port. But the fact of the matter is I support this effort wholeheartedly, because in order for us to grow, and even in the city of Tallahassee, in those areas that don't have ports, we need these ports. We need to transport. We need an intermodal system that gets our goods and services, gets our goods by highways or rail or whatever to the ports, so we can get them, so that we can have those kinds of things happen. I want to mention one other thing too. I just recently came back from China in October. when I was in China, I was in Rigao, China, and the Changshu port in China, the 7th largest port in the world now, was built in 6 years. Can you imagine that? That is the resolve that the Chinese have in terms of building their infrastructure. We all know that the infrastructure, as you've heard, in the United States is crumbling. We're living on borrowed time. If we don't do something now and do something quickly, we're going to find ourselves in a tremendous deficit position in terms of where we are in the world. So we have to do this. And the one thing that I really want to emphasize, about 3 times during the course of our meeting this morning, that was mentioned, we don't have a national policy. We don't have a national policy on transportation. We don't have a national policy on freight. We don't have a national policy on the environment. Something's wrong. This is not a partisan issue. None of this is partisan. We should be able to go to Congress in a bipartisan way and say, look, this is what's needed for our country. Forget about the partisanship. We know that Washington, to a great extent, is broken. But the fact of the matter is, these are issues that we ought to be able to work together, and because they are just that important for our people. So we're going to do it at the mayor's level to make sure these things. We're going to push this, and with the leadership of our leadership, we're going to really make this happen. So,
thank you. One last mayor.
Thank you. Bill Wild, Mayor, Westland, Michigan. I'm here this weekend representing the 38 ports in the Great Lakes. You know, you heard a lot today about the infrastructure that's needed for these ports and what will come about it if we can do that. You know, at the same time as mayors, we know the appetite's not out there in Washington or back in the heartland to take on additional debt to drive up our national debt even more. But there's a trust fund right now that's in the current budget. It's called the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, that every piece of freight that moves through the ports now is being taxed. It's called the Harbor Maintenance Tax. And that tax goes into a trust fund, and that trust fund has a balance of $6 billion right now. So the trust fund was set up to do these maintenance repairs, to do this dredging, to do the improvements to the system. So that money's out there. We need the federal government to put that money to use for what it's intended for. It shouldn't be a slush fund. It shouldn't be a spot on the balance sheet that helps balance out the federal government's credit score. That money was put there for a reason, and you know, the consumers have paid that tax. It's been passed down the line. So there is money available for the type of things we're using or that we're talking about today. So it should be used for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.